G'day and welcome back to the channel. Now, there's been an interesting survey report released here in New Zealand by the Civil Aviation Authority, Ministry of Transport and Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. Now, I'm not going to bore you by going through this survey report page by page, but I am going to point to a media report, a news report, which is based on the results of this survey. And of course, media, they like to vilify drones and they love it when they've got a story handed to them on a plate, which is what a survey really is. It gives them all this facts and information. They don't have to research themselves. Someone else has done it. But the concern I have here is that this survey has been designed to produce answers that support a narrative. Now, the Ministry of Transport New Zealand, like similar agencies elsewhere in the world, they're looking to get recreational drones out of the air. They don't want them there. They're an impediment to the commercialisation of that airspace. So they've come up with plans and they needed some data to back up their claims that these recreational drones are dangerous and that they're a nuisance and that the public don't want them. So they commissioned a survey. Now, I participated in that survey and I was appalled at how biased and shaped the questions were, clearly designed to elicit responses, not to get honest reporting, but to back up a case that the Ministry of Transport was going to bring to basically introduce harsher rules and regulations designed to get recreational multi-rotor drones and model aircraft out of the airspace. So they didn't conflict with all these important commercial users like Google and Amazon and so forth. So yeah, when I saw this report, this survey report, it confirmed what my fears were. And of course, as I say, the media have latched onto this. Let's bring up the media page that I'm talking about. There's a report. I'll just maximize this for you. Here we go. This is Stuff. Stuff is a New Zealand publication. They claim to be the most authoritative and the most biggest and best news reporting organisation in this country. They have an online version and they have printed versions in various areas. This one comes from the Dominion Post, which is our capital city. So here we are. Here is the headline from this survey. And right from the get-go, I've got to say, this guy, Tom Hunt, he can't call himself a journalist. This is one of the worst pieces of writing I have ever seen. I used to be the editor of 7am News, which was, at the time, the world's most widely syndicated web-based news service. I've been writing, and I've been a journalist for many, many years before I was a RC guy on YouTube. I know how journalism works. I know the standards that are demanded. When I was an editor, I demanded pretty high standards. This guy would have been out the door in 5 seconds, and you'll see why as we get through this report. First of all, this is a vilification story, as most drone stories are these days. And it says 1 in 5 drone users flouting rules by flying in restricted airspace. Okay. Now, a more objective headline might have read 4 out of 5 drone users fly safely. But no. The 1 in 5, the other ones we want to focus on, 1 in 5 flouting the rules. 4 in 5 don't flout the rules. Which is the real story? Well, yeah, this is going towards proving that all drone users need to be taken out of the sky. They're too dangerous because they're flouting the rules. Well, only 1 in 5, but hey, who cares about the 4 in 5 that are flying safely? Anyway, that just sets the whole tone for this story. Let's go down here. And now I want to talk about journalism and this particular publication and Tom, because this newspaper, like all others, is begging for money because they, how hard it is to make money in the news game these days. So let's have a look. They've got this, please contribute now. And if we go to that page, they claim this is why you should give them money, $10 a month, $100 a year, or you can choose how much you give them. They say your contribution, whatever the size, will allow us to continue providing quality journalism. See that phrase? Quality journalism. Let's put that to the test, shall we? Let's read the very first sentence in this story, and it says, more than 1 in every 5 New Zealand recreational drone flights are being made in airspace they could come into the path of another aircraft. That made no sense at all because Tom, being frugal with the language, forgot to put in the word where. Let me read it as it should read. More than 1 in every 5 New Zealand recreational drone flights are being made in airspace where they could come into the path of another aircraft. So Tom doesn't understand grammar. Did Tom go to school? Really seriously, who proofreads this stuff? Well, the answer is in a quality journalistic publication, they have a proofreader. Someone reads it to make sure, because I know I've written so much stuff, it's easier to leave a word out, make a mistake. So the proofreader reads it and fixes those mistakes. Not on Stuff. Quality journalism here doesn't demand a proofreader. No. So we get stuff like that. And I want you to read this phrase here. They could come into the path of another aircraft. Remember that phrase, because Tom's also really into recycling. You will see in a minute. Anyway, the next paragraph, the next sentence/paragraph says, the findings come in a new report from Civil Aviation Authority. Actually, the Civil Aviation Authority. Again, he's forgotten a word and no proofreading. So the findings come in a new report from the Civil Aviation Authority, which showed a surge in drone use, but not necessarily a corresponding increase in knowledge of the rules. Let's get to the second one. Restricted airspace is an area that drones could come into the... Hang on a minute. Here's this phrase here. Could come into the path of another aircraft. And down here, could come into the path of another aircraft. So already we're only 3 sentences in, and Tom is recycling his phrases to make it very clear, because restricted airspace is an area that drones could come into the path of another aircraft, but the survey found 1 in 5 drone users were sending their remotely controlled aircraft into just such an area. Oh my goodness, how dangerous is that? And then to make the point, because this is not an objective story based on fact. This is a vilification story to support the agenda, the narrative that the Ministry of Transport is trying to get out there, that drones should be stricken from the skies. Here's this great big plane and this man with his drone. And my goodness, that was a near miss, wasn't it? That drone could have brought down this plane. Emphasis, emphasis. This is a staff reporter. So this was a picture they commissioned, obviously, for this very reason, to make drones look bad. This is crap journalism, Tom. What are you doing? Anyway, let's move on, because you think it couldn't get any worse? Well, it gets worse. Watch this. Airline Pilots Association, ALPA, has previously warned that a drone in the path of a plane could bring down a commercial jet. But 2 years on from the grave warning, it appears word has not reached many in New Zealand's drone community. It's reached 80%. It's only 20% that admit to flying in restricted airspace. Not many. How does 80% mean? How do you equate that to not many? I'd say this should have read, word has reached the majority of New Zealand's drone community. But no, doesn't fit the narrative, doesn't fit the agenda here. This is terrible. And also, if it was such a grave warning, why hasn't something happened in the 2 years since that grave warning was issued? In fact, why hasn't this happened anywhere in the world in the 10 years since recreational multi-rotor drones became a thing? It's because it's not a big issue. It is less likely to happen than you getting badly injured by a piece of falling space rock, and we'll get to that later. But let's move on. And now about the journalism. ALPA International Direct Corps. What the hell is a direct corps? It looks like Tom doesn't even have a spell checker. Not only does he not have a proofreader, he doesn't have an understanding of basic English grammar, but he doesn't have a spell checker. This is quality journalism, they told us. They told us over here, this is quality journalism, folks. This is it. It's what you get for your money if you send them money. This is atrocious. I hope you're equally as flabbergasted as I am. This is just terrible. Anyway, Tim Robinson says, unlike birds, drones were solid. Oh, I didn't know birds were hollow. In fact, I've dressed turkeys and chickens. They're not hollow. Tim, you're talking through a hole in your head. Birds are not hollow. But unlike birds, drones were solid and metal. Well, actually, a lot of drones aren't metal. There's not much metal in a drone, mostly plastic or carbon fibre. This is metal motors. Most of it's not metal, I've got to tell you. Anyway, a mid-air collision with a plane, especially if it hit an engine, fuel tank or wing, could be catastrophic. And there have been close calls near airports in recent years. So what he's saying is there haven't been any collisions, just close calls. An inch is as good as a mile there, Tim. But anyway, here's this agenda. Ministry of Transport and CAA were both looking at rule changes, which were needed. That's a very big claim. We need rule changes. Why? Because nobody's been seriously injured, nobody's been killed, no aircraft have been brought from the skies, no property's been damaged. So why do we need the rule changes? We need them because you want to get commercial operators in there, don't you? You want to get the recreational flyers out of the sky. As I said, I've never seen this agenda expressed more blatantly than here in this article and in that survey. Anyway, we're talking about Mr. Robinson here, the direct core of ALPA. And while you're at it, Tom, ALPA, it's an acronym, should all be capitals. Never mind. He called for drone and user registrations for drones 150 grams or heavy. 150 grams. Why 150? Now, in the USA, it's 250. In the UK, it's 250. In Europe, it's 250. Just about everywhere else in the world, they've settled on 250 grams. Why do you, as someone who is making all these wild, unsubstantiated claims, believe that 150 is the number? Where's your evidence to back up this 150 grams rather than 250? You're talking out a hole in your backside, Mr. Robinson. I'm sorry, I have to say that. It's blatantly true. As well as training and competency checks. Yeah, because so many people are dying, aren't they? Yes, obviously. Again, where's your evidence? You're making stuff up. And then, let's get on. CAA Acting Deputy Chief Executive, Safety Deputy Chief Executive Dean Winter said, clear messages are needed for drone users. Well, I can't disagree with that. Everyone should know the rules. Everyone should be aware of what's going on. Everyone should know about safety. And I've said I'm happy to work with Dean and CAA to make sure that happens. And I don't think they'd have a bigger ally in that than myself. Still waiting to hear back from them after Dean's first communication, but I'm sure that will happen. If it doesn't, I'll be on their case next week. Anyway, Dean says, no pilot wants to come across a 10 kg drone on their approach as they're coming into land, and people on the ground don't want one hurtling their way either. Oh dear, I had high hopes for Mr. Winter. I'd hoped that he was objective, he was knowledgeable, and he wasn't going to be carried away in all this hysteria and start spouting out bullshit like this. Now, we're talking about recreational multi-rotor drones. Please show me these 10 kilogram recreational multi-rotor drones. CAA's own survey, the survey they commissioned, itself proves that the vast majority of recreational multi-rotor drone users are using Phantoms at less than 1.5 kilograms, Mavics at about 1 kilogram, Mavic Airs at much less, Mavic Minis less than 250 grams. So where does this 10 kilogram drone figure come from unless you're just trying to scare people? Unless you're trying to vilify drones. No one wants a 10 kilogram drone hurtling towards them. Well, of course, but it's not going to be a recreational user who does that. It'll be a commercial user. So why change the recreational rules based on a ridiculous claim that a 10 kilogram drone, recreational drone, is going to bring down an airplane or scare people on the ground? I'm sorry, this is ridiculous, Mr. Winter. I have to call you on this. And when I speak to you, I will be raising this. You are bullshitting the public. You are bullshitting the people. You're bullshitting the media. That is unreasonable. I cannot condone that. You and I, we're going to have words about this. If you want safety, you cannot get safety through lies and bullshit like this. Absolutely not. You've got my phone number, by the way. Give me a ring. We need to talk about that. That's unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. And of course, here's an Inspire. This isn't a recreational drone. I don't know anyone that flies these recreationally. No pilot wants to come into contact with a drone. Well, certainly not this one. And of course, it's got teeth on it to make it look even more menacing. Is the agenda not clear, people? Could even a child not spot the agenda in this article and in CAA and the Ministry of Transport's statements? This is outrageous. But unfortunately, the great unwashed public will take this at face value. And that's why I get so upset by this. Now, Mr. Winter goes on to say, even small drones can pose a real risk to manned aviation. So it's important that recreational drone users avoid other aircraft at all times and steer well clear of airports. And 80% of them do, by your own figures. 80% do. And in fact, the fact that we haven't seen any drones hitting airplanes, only microlight pilots claiming drones hit them, only to be found out it's a lack of maintenance later on. The fact we haven't seen this shows that, hey, recreational drone users are doing a damn good job at the moment, actually, to be totally honest. He goes on to say also, we know that drones can also cause significant harm to people and their property if they're not operated safely. Well, okay, Mr. Winter, here's a challenge. Show me the injuries, show me the property damage caused by recreational multi-rotor drones. You can't, because the number of such cases are virtually zero. They may not be zero, but they're so close to zero as being zero. And you cannot make these claims without evidence. You are trying to create FUD, fear, uncertainty and doubt, by plucking this stuff out of your backside and presenting it as fact. Fact requires evidence. Where's your evidence? I'm challenging you. Come up. Evidence, please. Evidence. When we have a chat, I'll be raising this as well. This is just unacceptable for the head of a government department to tell blatant lies in respect to creating fear on this basis. We know they can, but they don't. They haven't. And why would you need to change rules that so far have protected the public safety perfectly well? Okay? And this thing here, highlighting the need for get permission to fly over people, Yeah, fair enough. Flying over people, I don't do it. That's a very good rule. People should not be allowed to fly their drones over people without the permission of those people. I fully back you on that. I'm not anti-CAA. I'm anti-bad rules. That's a good rule. I commend you for that rule. But their property, and this is where things go a bit askew, because in New Zealand you need to get permission to fly over a property, even if that property is a grassy field in the middle of nowhere. What is endangered if I fly my 250-gram quad over a grassy field in the middle of nowhere? The worst that can happen is a blade of grass gets broken. Seriously, let's play to the real risks, not this ridiculous thing here. We need to talk. We need to talk. Anyway, and now the media again. The CAA survey found that 2.5 out of every 10 recreational users had very little or no idea about the rules. So 75% of them did have a pretty good idea of the rules. That's not bad going by international standards. And the other thing is that how do you define recreational user? Based on your highly biased survey, a user is anyone who had flown a drone. So if I go around to Bob's place and Bob's got a drone and we're sitting out in the back in his yard and he says, have a go with this, and I lift it off and put it down again, by CAA's definition, I'm a recreational user. Now, does it matter that I didn't have a good grasp of the rules? I don't know the rules, because I may never fly a drone again, and that may have been a 5-second flight into a tree or a bush or something. Should I have had to learn all the rules just to do that? No, it's an unreasonable expectation. So you cannot use this information unless you're trying to pursue an agenda, which you obviously are. And then we have 1 in 5 recreational flights may have taken place in restricted airspace in breach of the rules. So 80% don't. Isn't that the biggest story? 80% of people flying in the right place in accordance with the rules. Yeah, but let's ignore the positives. Let's focus on the negatives. This is a vilification story after all. And this is the bit I like the most, because it means CAA have no call on me. That all the claims that I might have broken the rules can be dismissed immediately. Dismissed immediately, because the survey did not find a single woman older than 60 who flew drones recreationally, nor any people that age who broke the rules. I'm 67, and according to CAA's own survey, people over 60 don't break the rules. Case closed. End of investigations. Simple as. Let he who lives by the distorted and twisted survey die by the twisted and distorted survey. You're telling me people over 60 don't break the rules. I'm over 60. Stop wasting your time investigating me. Your own survey says I didn't break the rules. Unless you're telling us that the survey is incorrect, the data cannot be relied on, in which case all the other stuff in there must also be called into question. All those results that you got by carefully crafting questions to solicit answers that support the agenda. I'm sorry, you've just shot yourselves down in flames with that one. And in Tom here, the survey did not find a single woman over 60. Well, are there no single women older than 60? I don't know. But let's go back to this. It also found there were more than 175,000 drones in New Zealand. How many manned aircraft are there? There's less than 10%, that number. So the laws of proportionality would suggest that maybe if we're trying to keep airspace safe with 175,000 drones, we should allow a little more space for those drones. I think instead of 400 feet, we should have a ceiling of 1,500 feet, because, hell, there are 10 times as many drones as manned aircraft. Shouldn't they have 10 times as much space? Maybe a little less because they're smaller, but still a lot more than they've got. So our case should be, we want that ceiling raised for safety reasons. And then, again, because of the very loose definition of a user, a recreational drone flyer, there are nearly 300,000 people using drones in New Zealand. How many pilots are there? How many people with aviation licenses are there in New Zealand? Less than 10%, that number. So again, drone users outnumber pilots by more than 10 to 1. So when it comes to making rules, when it comes to granting privileges, when it comes to rights, we should be proportionately represented. There should be 10 times as many people on the rulemaking panel from the unmanned aviation community as there are from the manned aviation community. That's not happening. That's not democracy. That's not proportional representation. I'm sorry, that needs to change. By your own survey, you're telling us that the unmanned aviation community is woefully underrepresented in the rulemaking process. There you go. He who lives by the survey must die by the survey. And finally, CAA was this week launching a new drone safety campaign, which is, well, I'm kind of disappointed in Mr. Winter, because I'd have loved to have been front and centre in that campaign promoting drone safety. He could have mentioned that I've developed the ADSB belt alarm, which is a huge step forward in promoting safety for drone users everywhere in the world. And they could have ridden along on that. But maybe they don't want people knowing about that because that is counter to the agenda. They don't want people knowing that it's getting safer in the era of drones, because drone users are taking the initiative and developing technology that makes drone flying safer. Harder to pass rules to ban the damn things if they're actually, the people who fly them are doing the right thing. So there we go. I'm so disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed in the statements from CIA, the statements from ALPA, Tom's appallingly inept reporting, and his lack of, his English is second language. He doesn't look like English would be his second language, and his name doesn't suggest it, but his writing certainly does. And stuff, why do you publish this drivel, this nonsensical, skewed, subjective drone vilification stories that serve no purpose other than to get people looking at these ads? That's all you're doing. You're not a journalism. You're not journalism. You are simply selling ad space. You're an ad merchant. And stories, well, more sensational the better, eh? That's it. That's all I've got to say. This is outrageous. This is ridiculous. Now, I will be looking at that survey separately because I want to examine it. This is what's happening all over the world. Everywhere in the world, the regulators are trying to clear us out of the airspace by concocting these stories that we're unsafe in obvious conflict with the data that shows we are so safe. Unmanned aviation is the safest branch of aviation that has ever been, that will ever be. But apparently we need more regulation. Nobody's died in the entire history of recreational multi-rotor drone use. Not one death anywhere in the world. Yet, apparently it's still too dangerous because they're making up stuff. And if we look at the figures, if we look at the science, where's the risk assessment? I keep asking, where is your risk assessment? You make these bold claims, you haven't even done a risk assessment. Why not? Because a well-conducted risk assessment would dismantle your case. It would not give you the evidence you need for these rules. It would basically show the agenda and that the claims do not match the facts. The only people who have done the scientific risk assessment is the George Mason University in America. They crunched the numbers. And although we're told grave warnings from ALPA that, drones can bring down aircraft, you're actually in more danger of being injured by an exploding piece of space rock over your head. The George Mason University said the risk of someone being injured or dying as a result of a drone colliding with an aircraft is once every 400 years. That's how often they expect that kind of thing to happen. Once every 400 years. Yet, we've seen in the past couple of hundred years, once every 100 years, a piece of space rock explodes over planet Earth and people are badly injured. It happened in Tunguska at the turn of last century, and it happened a few years ago at Chelyabinsk in Russia again. 800 people hospitalized when a piece of space rock exploded over that city, shattering windows. Right? 800 people hospitalized with injuries. Number of people injured by drones hitting aircraft? Zero. Risk. It's not only the consequence, it's the probability, and we've proven the probability is very low. In the case of drones hitting aircraft, even when there have been collisions between drones and aircraft, drones and helicopters, the consequences, not one injury, not one death. So let's deal with facts, even if they're inconvenient, shall we? I'm taking this further. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep pushing this until we wake up the public, we wake up people to realize that this is nothing to do with safety. This is all about clearing a hobby from the airspace for commercial agendas, and it is not good enough. If I'm wrong, Mr. Winter, if I'm wrong, Mr. Robinson, just provide me with the evidence that I have challenged you to provide to back up your outrageous claims that are designed to do nothing but create fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the eyes of the public. Thank you for watching, people. Thanks to my Patreon supporters. You make it possible for me to make these videos that challenge things like this, ridiculous things like this. Now I've got other things to do. I'll spot you later. Bye for now.